Hi,
Nice talk.
I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to be able to speak to you today. How are you?
Hi, Sarah. How are you doing? I'm fine, thank you. Yeah,
Oh, good. Maybe you could kick off with an introduction to this amazing, weird and wonderful film, Poor Things. For people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect?
sure. I mean, Poor Things is directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, and I think if you've seen any of his films before, The Lobster, The Favorite, these incredible things, there's a lot you might expect. And actually, even having been involved in it from the beginning, this film is unlike anything he's done before. He's reached a really unique and high level of creativity and expression. So it's incredible, and you'll see aspects of his work, but it's a really, really different level of filmmaking. And I think if you have any passion for cinema at all, then this would be a really stupid thing to miss.
And I was amazed to learn that this was actually your first film soundtrack, but also that Yorgos actually hadn't used a composer in any of his other films. So it was kind of, an unlikely pairing just in that sense. So just to take a step back, how familiar were you already with his work? Had you seen all of his films? Did you have a favorite film? And what did you think when you first got a call from him?
Yeah, sure. No, it's true. No, he's never used a composer. I've never done a film before, so both of us were sort of kind of, a bit apprehensive and coy about the whole thing, which is sort of sweet. But it's nice that we came onto it at the same level as both kind of being virgins, I suppose. Um, yeah, I'd seen his films before. I really loved them. I actually took someone on a date to see Killing of a Sacred Deer once, which was, a really terrible idea for a date film, but there you are. But yeah, no, it was extraordinary. I got an email completely out of the blue about 2.5 years ago, having already loved his films, and his producer saying, "Hello, I work for Yorgos Lanthimos, director of The Lobster, etc., etc. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's familiar with yours." Blown away by that. Uh, yeah, but no, it's gone great, I think, for a first attempt.
And at what point were they just still with the novel? Had they already adapted it into the screenplay? So, kind of at what point in their creative process were you brought on board?
Yeah, I was brought on about 6 months before photography started. So by that point, they had the finished script and they had the finished designs for the whole film, the set designs, the props, which are obviously a really, really key part of the whole process. So that's all I had to go on, which is, very specific, but actually, a huge amount of very nutritional information. And then most of the score was actually written before filming even started, just based on our conversations and looking at all this really incredible material.
And what did you look at most? Did you go back and read the novel, or was it all there in the script? And I believe there was already some really strong kind of ideas about how it was going to look. Particularly the costumes, the set design. So maybe that was kind of what could inspire the music most for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I was told not to read the novel, and wasn't allowed to do that. But yeah, no, we didn't have any references at all outside of the film, which was actually a very odd but very helpful way of going about it. So we didn't talk about any other music or composers or films. So, but I had everything I needed. The script was extraordinary. I was extremely moved by the characters and the way in which they displayed their emotions, and so I that was a great foundation for where the actual content, where the themes and the melodies and the sort of space they needed to come from. And then, yeah, of course, by that point, the art direction was, already in the insane kaleidoscopic space that you see in the finished film. And that was a great impetus for how I was going to orchestrate it, what kind of sounds I was going to use, what kind of instruments and processes, because once you see artwork that looks like that, you can't do anything conventional whatsoever. You couldn't just go and do a plaintive little piano score. I had to really break a lot of boundaries and come into a totally unique and surreal space.
And in terms of your own background and the way you sort of make your own music, and I know you've done music for an opera before, did you feel like you already had a process you could apply to this? Or because it was something so different, did you almost kind of start from a blank sheet of paper?
Sure. No, I had no idea what I was doing at any point of the process whatsoever. It was completely terrifying and continues to be. No, but I had a toolkit and I had written music before, and the dauntingness of it being a really large scale feature film actually subsided pretty quickly. The main thing which had always been at the core of my writing, which is why I like, writing pop music so much. And the opera as well involved a great deal of this, was playing with this rawness of emotion and trying to interact with human experience and the range of human sentiment without trying to make it too elegant, without trying to kind of turn it into this really polished, beautiful piece of art, actually trying to properly mirror how, ridiculous or how embarrassing or naive people's feelings about things are, especially strong feelings like grief and love and anger. And this script was so full of that sort of thing. Is I could, when Bella falls in love in the script, I wanted the music to fall in love with her. And when she, experienced horror for the first time, I really wanted it. I didn't want it to be just this sort of slightly moody string thing. I wanted it to scream and really completely lose its shit. So that, I think, was something I was able to apply very confidently to the score.
Mm. And would you say actually that, you share some commonality in your creative approach with Yorgos, in kind of taking, you've got very traditional music background, but with kind of contemporary aspects as well, and maybe being quite direct with your lyrics and things like that, and Yorgos, almost his approach can be to be quite blunt about things, and whether that brings out the horror or the anxiety or the humor, and it's something, perhaps unexpected, but really works.
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. I think we both agree being kind of, not hiding behind any facade. And also, I think we both have a kind of similar sense of humor. And I think both of us agree that humor is a really important part of human experience. And actually, it's kind of every serious thing that happens to someone is peppered with this kind of stupidity or this ridiculousness. And I think there's so much art, so much film that tries to portray these important human experiences as if they're this really glossy, flawless thing. But actually, grief, love, experience, the whole thing's like ridiculously funny and messy, even when it shouldn't be. And I think that's actually a very profound foundation to approach this sort of work from. So, yeah.
And in terms of sort of the technicalities of the score that you created, maybe you can talk us through a little bit about, the instruments that you decided to use, what sounds you were playing with, to bring out kind of, I guess sometimes the characters being quite childish and her sort of doing things or going through motions that are familiar to us, but always a little bit off or a little bit strange.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a great deal of thought put into that. I decided that I wanted to play with the idea that's looked in the film a lot about human life. What does life mean? And the oddness when it's sort of manipulated, or in this case, there's reanimation, and there's this sense of unease about what the real nature of mortality and the soul and so on is. So, for example, we took a lot of live instrumental recordings and put processes on them to kind of move them away from a familiar orchestral or a familiar instrumental sound to give this uncanniness. And the other way around, we had a lot of digital and synthesized sounds, which I added processes to and filters to kind of make them seem a bit more like human speech or organic sort of noises. In order to do that, we had to record every single instrument completely separately. So no orchestras in a room, no ensembles, which took maybe 20 times longer than it would have in an orthodox way. But it let me really have this surgical control over every single sound and to kind of bend it and alter it to match the feeling of the film.
And it was quite a lot of wind instruments, is that right? But using them perhaps in not the conventional ways we think of them.
Yeah. Wind is a really interesting thing, I think, as well, thinking about themes to do with life and what that could mean or how that could be manipulated. Wind is great because it involves breath, and breath and life are obviously very connected as a symbol and as a feeling. One idea I played with was there's a way in which you can categorize wind instruments where you have wind that comes from a person, so breath, like a flute or a trumpet, is coming out of you. And you have wind instruments where the breath is mechanically made. It's this invention. So pipe organs, bagpipes, accordions, you're basically making a machine breathe on your behalf. And what you get with wind instruments that come from a body is you get a lot of bending and it sounds very normal. When you get like a saxophone bending, that's kind of fine because we're used to human voices bending all the time. It's how we speak, it's how you recognize someone as a person rather than a machine. But you don't usually get that with mechanical wind instruments, pipe organs, accordions. They're usually a very flat pitch. So we spend a lot of time adding these processes to mechanical wind to make them kind of bend and talk. And the result was something actually quite unnerving and quite uncanny. The same way in the film, there are these occasional shots where you see Bella and realize she's not entirely human, or she's not our definition of human. And so, especially in the more alarming parts of the score, having these organs and these instruments making human sounds when they shouldn't be able to, I think was really key to driving home this theme of how do you react to such an unusual life form?
Going along that process, I mean, I guess once you'd sort of landed on your approach, did it all just kind of flow, or did you feel like you came unstuck at any point? Was a really challenging moment?
There was a lot of time, which I was really thankful for. We had 6 months before shooting even started, in which we finished most of the score. And Yorgos and I spent a lot of time talking about, what was appropriate. And most of the conversations were basically me wondering if something was too weird and him saying it's not weird enough. So I learned more and more that actually that the point of this film is to really push it as far as you can. But the points I think where I might have got unstuck were if I had forgotten about the core of the film and kind of just started messing about and making kind of weird noises for the sake of it. And behind all of this experimentation, it was really important that the emotional core of the film, chiefly Bella and the way in which she evolves in such an unusual way, not just from child to adult, but through these really odd experiences. And by the end of the film, she's something different and almost more than a human adult. So I would have never put a piece of music forward, and I discarded a lot of stuff because I didn't feel like it actually had the correct emotional resonance. It didn't actually match Bella and the point of the score, as well as cosmetically being in touch with the film's environment, was also that it had to grow with Bella. Like when she's young, it had to be kind of wobbly and topple a bit like a toddler, and it had to, scream and be in pain when she sees horror for the first time. And it was the anchoring aspect of the whole score was making sure it was always fully in touch with the emotion of the film, and it completely conveyed how strong they were.
Mm. And on the flip side, did you have a favorite moment that you enjoyed the most about making?
Ooh, favorite moment. I think I've got two musically. I like the part in Alexandria where she sees the slum for the first time because it's the loudest piece of music. And I also like very near the beginning where Max and Bella are falling in love because it's the quietest piece of music. There's very quiet bells and voices, and I like how cute that is. But also there's the dance sequence in the middle. I mean, that was an extraordinary challenge and really, really fun. I had to go on set and basically direct all these musicians. We had a 4 or 5 day long shoot, just getting this very complicated dance scene right. And that was a huge amount of fun, and being able to spend time on set and experience the world of the film and interact with the dancers and the choreographers and the actors. So, that was a great moment where I think all the departments kind of came together and we could really see how we were playing with each other.
The thing that I guess to an outsider does seem surprising is that it was pretty much written, before they even started filming. And then it was kind of overlaid and, just sort of fit perfectly. But I guess also part of Yorgos's approach is that it's not supposed to be just completely smooth. Like sometimes it is kind of maybe jarring, or it's heightening the melodrama, or it's heightening the feeling of anxiety by sometimes being so unexpected. So I mean, how was that process? And when you watched it back for the first time with your soundtrack there, like, did it surprise you, or is it what you expected?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, from the outside, that could seem like a disjointed process, but I mean, Yorgos is an extraordinarily clever director. He really knows what order to do things in and how to make it come together correctly. So having all of the designs and the script done before I came on board meant I could feed from that. And then by the time the music was done, it meant that on set, he was playing the music during shooting and before and after the takes. It was being funneled into the room. So that then allowed the actors and everyone on set to really, be immersed in the environment, the production designs, the costumes, the music. So I think actually doing it in this order really allowed the film to grow organically, and for every person at their correct point in the process to have as much experience and sensual nutrition as they could. So it didn't feel like it was a disjointed thing at all. It actually felt like a really natural progression. And I think Yorgos is really, really talented at it not just seeming like a kind of set of pieces of work, but actually this, really important experience. And then, we all saw it come together in the edit, and it was, extraordinary. I couldn't have imagined the film feeling like that or looking like that, even from what I knew so far. So it's a real testament to his vision and how he constructed the entire work.
Almost like your music was kind of the conductor. It was setting the rhythm. So, it wasn't something that was happening completely independently. It was like there embedded while the film was being made.
Yeah, sure. And I think, it's the case for a lot of the film. I don't think any of it seems like it's been added in. It's just this thing that kind of grew from him. And I think, but there's such a symbiosis as well. I would have never written music like that if I hadn't known how incredible the production design would look like, or how intense the emotion was. And of course, seeing Emma and her manifest the script I knew so well. And it was, she brought so much more out of it. And that, during the edit as well, I made changes and I realized, oh shit, this has to be more intense. This has to be more exaggerated here just to keep up with her performance. Just, it's extraordinary. And it's the kind of thing that really elevates everyone else's work, because you just don't want to seem like you're lagging behind it.
I was going to ask that question next. In fact, this incredible cast, Willem Dafoe, Mark Ruffalo, but of course, right at the centre, Emma Stone. And I guess maybe also because she'd already worked with Yorgos before and been involved from so early on, as a producer, and kind of, the creative input came right through the whole thing rather than just taking on the role itself. Seeing that performance must have been mind blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're correct. The entire cast is, just extraordinary. And again, what I said about how it explores emotion and human experience, I love how every single actor brought their own interpretation of this kind of emotional growth and this kind of bizarre adolescence. Willem Dafoe throwing tantrums as an adult professional medic, Rami Youssef doing an incredible kind of slightly meek, timid London Egyptian boy. That there's all these different facets of the script that are so illuminated and exaggerated by everybody. And of course, Emma, she was involved so early on, and she really comprehensively understood the DNA of her character, but also the wider film. And so, as a producer as well, interacting with her and Yorgos, it almost felt like something that had existed for so much longer than it had. It was so thoughtful and complex and really cared about.
I'm almost out of time, but so just very quickly, ultimately, what do you hope people take away from watching the film? I just feel like with Yorgos's films, like they are weird and wonderful, but it's amazing how it can get you to have a new perspective on life. Even though you're in this completely fantastical kind of world. So what do you think the takeaways are? Maybe you can say also a few words about what you might be working on next after this.
On one level, it's an extraordinary piece of art. It's gorgeous from every direction, and I think anyone who loves any sort of art or film would, be extremely upset not to see something like this. But for me, it really made me think about how I act, how I've emotionally involved, and what the film raises so many questions about. How are you allowed to interact with people? What are you allowed to feel? Like, what could you change? And also, what boundaries could you break, which are arbitrarily constructed? So there's a huge amount to contemplate. And I really think that seeing it, you'll have such a different interpretation of yourself and how you grew up and how you became the person you are. And it's put into this really stark relief from all of the characters. So I felt that very, very early on. So I hope people have those sorts of thoughts or those sorts of interrogations afterwards. And then after this, I hope to do more films. It's very fun, very exciting. I hope to continue to work with extraordinary filmmakers such as Yorgos. I'd be very lucky too. And I might keep writing pop songs as well, which I also like doing. I just like writing music, it's all I can do, to be honest.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And congratulations, on this amazing collaboration. Can't wait for everyone else to also see Poor Things, and best of luck with your future stuff as well.